Well, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Our luncheon's running a little bit long, but appreciate your patience. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this entire session is being taped and will be on our continuing education channel on the site, so you can access that later on. Well, welcome to today's panel, Social Media 2.0, Social Media Training, the Protection, Future, and Reputation of your student athletes, and how this fits into your institution's overall digital communication strategies. I'm Joe Browning from UNC Wilmington. Thanks for attending. Very pleased today to have two individuals who are innovators in the social media realm. To my immediate left is Kevin DeShazo. Kevin earned his undergraduate degree from Oklahoma State University and his MBA from Oklahoma Baptist. He founded Fieldhouse Media in 2011 to partner with high school and collegiate athletic departments to help their student athletes and coaches utilize social media. He serves as vice president and senior strategist at Smirk New Media, Oklahoma's largest social media strategy firm. He and his wife Megan have two young sons. He lives in Edmond, Oklahoma. He notes that he's a significant fan of coffee. I'm not sure what that means, but maybe he can elaborate on that. To my far left is Patrick Powers. Patrick currently leads the digital marketing and communications team for the Global Marketing and Communications Unit at Webster University. He provides university leadership for the development and implementation of integrated marketing and communication strategies designed to attract students, specifically through the web and new media. His background includes more than 10 years in the marketing and communications field, with experience as a reporter, writer, editor, web developer, and community manager. Earned his bachelor's degree here in St. Louis from St. Louis University, holds two master's degrees from the University of Illinois in Springfield, and an MBA from Webster. So please join me in welcoming these two gentlemen. Our format today, we'll have each gentleman make a brief presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions. So first out of the blocks, we'll kick it off with Kevin DeShazo.
Good afternoon. I'm excited to be here. And I'm glad that this is after the session that Ronnie and Dana and all the folks from NCAA and Sidearm discussed yesterday, because what they talked about obviously was social media and addressing social media from a macro perspective. How can we use it as a department? How can we build our brand as a department? And that's all good, it's all necessary, and things that you need to do. But the piece that gets left out most often are student athletes. And they're a significant piece of your brand, maybe the most important piece of the brand when it comes to getting your name out there. So what Fieldhouse Media does, like Joe said, we have two main focuses. One is providing social media education sessions for your student athletes and helping them understand how to utilize social media well, what that looks like and why it's important, and understanding the risks. And then we also provide monitoring services. So part of this session is going to be beneficial for you all in helping you understand social media a little bit more. And then some of these slides you can in turn share with your student athletes, because it's beneficial for them as well as they understand social media. Kind of our claim to fame, a couple months back, Darren Rovell found out about us and tweeted that it's good to see companies like Fieldhouse popping up. Darren, if you don't know who he is, he covers sports business for CNBC, just is now going back to ESPN, but a big guy on social media. Some people love him, some people hate him, but that was kind of a fun moment. The big thing that we need to understand is that social media is more than just Twitter and Facebook. Those are the two things that get lumped in most of the time, and we'll focus on that today. But social media is a lot of things. We saw them talking about social TV yesterday when you're watching a sporting event or watching a TV show and you're tweeting about it. Now social music, right? With Spotify and Pandora, you're tweeting and you're posting your music playlists on Twitter and Facebook. We've got blogging, you've got YouTube, you've got Instagram. All these things together are social media. So it's bigger than just Twitter and Facebook. And at its core, social media is about connecting. It's just a big world of networking. And the unique thing about Twitter, the reason I love Twitter as opposed to Facebook, Facebook, most of the time, who you're connecting with on Facebook are people that you know you have a relationship with. Maybe college friends, colleagues, high school friends, family members. Sometimes people that you really don't care to see their updates about their kids 87 times a day. Twitter, you connect with who you want to connect with, regardless of whether or not they reciprocate that. They don't have to follow you back, but you can follow industry leaders, whether it's sports, business, music, arts, technology, and you can have inside access to people that have significant influence in whatever industries or hobbies or passions that you may have, and they don't have to follow you back. If they don't like your content, it's fine. You can still get access to what they're doing. So you connect with these people, and there's significant power with social media. We always hear a lot of bad about social media, specifically when it relates to student athletes. Some of the positive stories about social media. How many of you know who Gary Vaynerchuk is? Three wine drinkers in the room. Gary Vaynerchuk, he basically took over a family wine business that's been in business for a long time. I think out of New Jersey, New York. Because of Twitter and social media, it's grown into a $5 million empire. He now has a social media firm that works with the New York Jets, Coca-Cola, Oprah, but it all started because he used social media to basically just take his wine store on a global scale. There's a book that came out when I was in college called Blue Like Jazz, really good book. They were going to make a movie out of it. Funding got pulled from the movie about a month and a half before they were going to shoot. So the author blogs, hey, sorry, not going to happen. They pulled the funding. We're disappointed it happens. Two guys that had read the book said this is not acceptable. They had no relationship with the author, no relationship with anything other than they just loved the book. They said this is not okay. They created a Kickstarter page, which is, if you don't know what Kickstarter is, it's an online fundraising group. So they made a video on YouTube, said we love this book, this movie needs to be made, let's raise some money. Through only social media, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, they needed $180,000 to make this movie in 30 days. Kickstarter, you usually get 30 days. They passed that, I think, in 21 days. Raised over $350,000. The movie came out this spring. So social media is a powerful tool and can be used for a lot of good. People are using it for business on a daily basis. A good buddy of mine is a real estate agent. The last 2 years, he's averaged 83% of his business has come from Twitter and Facebook alone. He's using Twitter, Facebook on a daily basis to be an expert on real estate in Oklahoma City, and he's getting business as a result of it, connecting with his customer base. I saw this quote, I think it was last week. I believe it came from an associate professor at the University of Texas School of Journalism. Said the misuse of Twitter is due to a lack of understanding of the power of social media. It's so easy to hit send and not realize that more than my 12 followers can see this, more than my 15,000 followers can see this. 2 billion people have access to the internet. 2 billion people can see your tweet, whether or not they have Twitter. And that's something that people don't think about when they're utilizing these platforms. My mom has no idea what Twitter is. She doesn't know what I do for a living because Twitter doesn't make sense. So I just tell your friends I'm a doctor. That sounds a lot better for both of us. My son plays on Twitter all day and he gets paid for it. But my mom, in conversation, she'll bring up certain things. I'm like, how did she know that? I didn't tell her that. And I realized she's stalking me on Twitter. She doesn't have a Twitter account, wouldn't know how to set one up, but I have a public account, so she knows how to use the Google, so she can find me on Twitter. But that's how we get in trouble, is because we don't realize that the world can see what we're posting. And so if our student athletes can understand that, along with many other things, but understand the power of social media and understand how big it really is and how many people can see what we're posting, that will help when it comes to appropriate use. It's important to know, we like to ignore social media. If we don't understand it, like say, oh, it's no big deal. It's fads, not, we'll just ignore it, it'll go away. This came out a couple weeks ago. 18 to 24-year-olds, college students, make up 27% of all social networking visits. So over a fourth of the visits to Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, Instagram are coming from college students. On Facebook, as of this morning, 38.3 million users in the U.S. that are college age. They make up 29% globally of all Facebook users. This age group does, and they're spending at least 15 hours per month on the site, which is an ungodly amount of time. But they're using it, right? We can't ignore 15 hours per month. We can't ignore 38 million users that are using this platform. Twitter, this came out 2 weeks ago. Pew Internet Research did a study from May 2010, November 2010 to February 2012. 18 to 24-year-olds with internet access, 31% of them use Twitter. That's up from 16% in November 2010. 20% are using it in a typical day. That's up from 4% in November 2010. So in 16, 18 months, a 400% increase in Twitter usage on a daily basis among college students. And what's interesting about that is that in 2010, when this survey started, every article you would read about social media as it relates to teens was that they're not using Twitter. It's an adult network. Teens are never going to use Twitter. They're avoiding it at all costs, and now they're going there in massive numbers. And it's not that they're leaving Facebook behind, because clearly they're using Facebook still, but they're adding Twitter to their social media toolbox. And the scary piece about that is that most of them are moving to Twitter because they feel like it's more private than Facebook. And it depends on how you view privacy. On some levels, yes, because if I follow you on Twitter, I don't know your email address, I don't know your birth date, things that I get if I do friend you on Facebook. But everything you share on Twitter, whether you have a protected account or not, is public. And so kids just don't understand Twitter. There's nothing private about Twitter. It's as public as you can possibly be online. Education has to be something that they're receiving on a consistent basis. But the point for these stats, and these are stats that your student athletes need to hear, not partially because they need to know just how big it is, and they can think about those things when they're posting, but partially because they just need to understand and acknowledge and accept how much they're using it. Dr. Timothy Elmore, many of you may have worked with him. He's a leadership consultant who works with a lot of collegiate programs and a lot of professional sports teams. He's dubbed the second half of Generation Y, Generation IY, because they're addicted, they're connected at all times to their iDevices, right? Their iPods, their iPads, their iPhones. And it's not that they use it a lot, it's that it's literally like an appendage. It doesn't leave their hand. And good or bad, that debate's going to go on forever, but the point is it's happening, and we can't ignore that. We need to acknowledge that it's happening. They need to acknowledge how much they're using it so they can begin to think about how they're using it and be intentional with how they're using it. So these kids are using it at the high school and collegiate level, but who's teaching them? Who's showing them the proper way to use these tools? Who's showing them how they can take advantage of these tools for themselves, how they can benefit a program by using these tools appropriately? And if somebody is teaching them, what are they teaching them? Because if their parents don't understand it, they can't effectively teach them. If a coach doesn't understand it, they can't effectively teach them. And what happens if you don't understand it and you're trying to teach them lessons on it, all you end up telling them is, don't post this, don't tweet this, don't do that, don't do this, don't make us look dumb, don't make a mistake, don't embarrass us, don't. And nobody learns that way. Because we don't understand it, we're afraid of all the mistakes that can come from inappropriate usage. And that's not, people don't learn that way, right? I played basketball in high school. I was not a good basketball player, but I could shoot really well. I learned to shoot because I spent hours upon hours with a coach showing me how to shoot well. Right? I didn't practice shooting with him yelling at me, don't do this, don't do that, don't, put your elbow in, don't stick it out, don't jump this way, don't, he said, elbow in, bend your knees, release at the top, follow through, showing me the appropriate way to do it, and through hours and hours of practice, I learned how to shoot really well. Same thing is true with social media. That sounds silly. That doesn't mean they need hours and hours of practice, but we need to be showing them the appropriate way to use it and how effective that can be for them. So we know that they're using it, right? We've seen these statistics. It's not a fad. It's not going away tomorrow. So we have three options. We can ignore it, we can ban it, or we can educate them about it. Ignoring it is probably the most dangerous strategy you can use. You're inviting chaos, you're inviting controversy, you're inviting mistakes if you ignore it. And there's really no reason to ignore it. If a player posts something and a member of the media asks you, did you know this? Nope, don't know what Twitter is. In 2012, there's no excuse to not know what Twitter is and what your players, how they're representing themselves in the program on Twitter. When you ignore it, you end up with headlines like these. These are just a few of the headlines from the past 6 months, right? NCAA suspends a player. Football player suspended from team. This one on the right, Yuri Wright was a high school student athlete, one of the top football programs in the country, offers from every big name school you can think of. Some blog posted his tweets. He had a private Twitter account, 2,500 followers. That's not very private. Many of those were media members because he was a high-profile student athlete. They start retweeting his stuff. A blog gets a hold of it, posts it. Big name school after big name school starts pulling scholarship offers. He ends up signing with a school, a good school, respectable school, but not the schools, not the powerhouses that were recruiting him. He ended up getting expelled from his high school. So his dream schools, BCS, championship caliber teams are pulling scholarship offers, and then he gets expelled from his team, all because he doesn't understand how to use Twitter. Nobody's shown him the appropriate way. They interviewed his coach. His coach said, "Look, we told him not to be stupid on Twitter." Clearly, that strategy does not work. I've talked to some of these players and asked them, were you told anything about Twitter? The common thread among all of them was, yeah, they told us, not to be dumb, not to post certain things. They talked to you about how to use it well and how this can be a great tool for you. No, they just told us what not to do, and that it just doesn't work. And you need to have policies in place, obviously, social media policies that provide some guidelines for conduct. I had one program, large, well-known football program, several players, they're notorious for not using Twitter well, to the point that a large newspaper wrote an article about how poorly their players use Twitter, and that somebody needs to come in and talk to these kids about how they're using social media. I have a relationship with several people on staff, so I shot them an email and said, look, we're to the point that they're now in the newspaper because of how they use it. We need to fix this. And his response was, well, we're going to adjust the policy and that'll change their behavior. I said, do you obey the speed limit all the time? So what do you mean? Well, that's policy. Policies are there essentially so we can discipline, right, when they break those, and that's fine. That's not a bad thing. Policies are necessary and we have to have them in place, but policies essentially are guidelines for what not to do that don't really help you put into practice what needs to be done. Policies aren't going to change behavior. So banning it, this was an article from Florida State. They had just lost 2 games, and their players, there are idiots online, right, that say horrible things to athletes, to student athletes, to coaches, things that are so offensive I can't show them to my wife. I mean, they're sick people, right, and you're not going to get around that. That's unfortunately part of it. But that's not a reason to shut it down. That's not a reason to ban it. These kids need to understand how to deal with that, that this stuff's going to happen. The answer isn't to run away and hide from it. Most of the time, we ban social media, we ban Twitter, and what's interesting is it's always Twitter, right? We never ban Facebook. You always see that they ban Twitter while their players are just posting horrible things at the same time on Facebook, but we ban Twitter. For some reason, Twitter has become the bad guy, but we always ban it, in my opinion, for 2 reasons: out of fear and of lack of education. I don't understand Twitter. It can't be good. Shut it down. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to learn about it. I don't want to have to deal with this. Let's shut it down. What happens when you ban it? They just go create fake accounts. They're not. I mean, these kids are smart. They know how to use this stuff. That doesn't mean they know how to use it well, but they know how to create fake Twitter accounts and use a different name. And all that does is create it creates a culture of fear, but it also creates a culture of distrust between players and staff and coaches, because they're having to go behind your back to use this technology that, again, 31% of them are using. They're using it all the time. Their friends are using it. A lot of teachers now have implemented social media into their coursework. So somehow, some way, they're going to use it, whether you know they are or not. But if you address the lack of education, you can eliminate the fear. If you can help a coach understand it, an SID, a student athlete, if you can address the lack of education, help them understand what Twitter actually is, then you can eliminate the fear and move forward and develop a strategy and a way for them to use it in a positive way. If you educate them properly, your student athletes and your coaches can be your most effective form of PR for a university. And Twitter is free, right? Facebook is free. And reporters are following them, media is following them, fans are following them, recruits are following them. If they can use this stuff well, they can be significant brand ambassadors for your program. Because that's the age we live in, and right or wrong, we want to, as much as I love this, Oklahoma State, where I went to college, and I want to follow their team accounts, I'm also going to follow their players, because I'm curious what they're doing. If they're not speaking a language I can understand on Twitter, then I'm going to unfollow them. If I have to plug it into Google Translate and it blows up, that's not somebody that I need to be following. It's not providing value. But if it's a quarterback, Heisman level quarterback, big time running back or point guard, I'm going to follow those people because I'm curious of the kind of people they are, right? How are they portraying themselves online? I want inside access, which is something they can provide within reason if they understand how to use it properly. So they can be significant brand ambassadors for your program. But how do we do this? Right? How do we talk to our players about social media? How do we address this issue? First thing is encourage them. We know they're using it, so encourage them to use it and encourage them to use it well. So like, we understand you guys are on this. You can really help yourself if you get social media, if you can treat it as a tool and not a toy, right? Social media is not text messaging. A lot of them think it is, and so they just view it to communicate back and forth with their friends. Text messaging is alive and well. Encourage them to text message. But encourage them to use social media in a way that represents themselves and the university well. The unique thing about social media is that these players, they can define who they are online. Right? No reporter can define who they are. Through social media, they have the power to control their identity. So one of the things we sit down with players and tell them is, pick 3 to 4 identity words. Tell them to a coach, tell them to a position coach, tell them to an SID, so that they know these words. Put every post, every picture, every comment through a filter. Right? Maybe you want to be known as for your faith, maybe humor, maybe hard work, maybe technology, maybe a musician, even though you're a student athlete. Put every tweet, every post through that filter. Is this what I'm about to post, is it going to build up this identity that I want to be known for, or is it going to damage it? If I could create any app, it would be an app that as soon as you hit tweet, it would say, are you sure? Yes or no? Okay, I hit yes. It wouldn't post it. 15 minutes later, pop up. Are you still sure you want to send it? No. Yes. Okay, another 10 minutes. Okay, finally, are you really sure? So after 25, 30 minutes, then you can officially send it. There'd be probably a lot of tweets that I've sent, not that they're inappropriate, but a lot of tweets that I've sent that I would have said after 30 minutes, I didn't need to tweet that. Because what we're doing, I saw a statistic, 2 weeks ago. The average Twitter user sees 17,000 tweets per day. That's a lot of noise. And when you combine that with all the ads on Facebook, all the ads on websites, all the ads on TV and radio, we're bombarded with noise all day, every day. So if we can get student athletes to think about how they're tweeting and say, okay, how can I avoid just adding more noise to Twitter, right? I don't need to be tweeting every morning, good morning, Twit fam. What's up, Twitter world? Man, had a good practice. Nobody cares, right? That's not adding any value. You're just tweeting because you're bored, and you're tweeting every thought that goes through your brain. And I've been that person. I have somewhat of an addiction to social media. I've tweeted 33,000 times in 3 years. Most of those are either during sporting events or when I first got on Twitter the first year, and I'd be that guy. I'm awake. Coffee's brewing. McDonald's breakfast burrito, awesome. Gonna regret that. Justin Bieber, call me maybe. I mean, it's 8 o'clock and I've tweeted 17 times, just a bunch of junk, right? I've just added more noise to Twitter. And so I'm following people that are doing that. And they're tweeting 17 pictures of their kids at dinner time with, baby peaches all over their face. Cute kid, I don't care to see 100 pictures from your 15-minute dinner, right? Live your life, don't tweet your life. So I'm following these people, and I'm like, my goodness, this is the most annoying thing I've ever seen. What are they doing? Put your phone down, go hug your kid. And so I'm ranting to my wife about this, about how stupid people are, and she kind of gives me this look, and I'm like, whoops, that's me. Because she pulls up, my last 10 tweets, and it's just worthless stuff. And so I changed the way that I use Twitter. I try to be intentional about what I tweet. Now, do I send dumb tweets? Sure. We all do every now and then, but if we can, a majority of the time be intentional about what we're sending, then we can add value to social media and to our brand and not just create more noise. But we need to discuss the risks, because the risks are real. And I don't live in this fantasy world where you talk to your kids once and they're the best Twitter users on the planet. That's not going to happen. They're going to make mistakes, and they need to understand that there are risks associated with social media. We talked about banning it before. Most of these kids are 18, right? They have rights. They're adults. They have the right to use Twitter. They have the right to use Facebook. That doesn't mean they have the right to use it irresponsibly. or to avoid consequences when they use it inappropriately. But they do have a right to use these tools, but it's on us, it's our responsibility to acknowledge that and to show them how they can use it well. But we need to discuss the risks, and some of it could be missing a game, some of it could be missing a job. 80% of employers now look at social media profiles when deciding on a candidate. 70% have hired somebody because of their social media profile. Obviously they were qualified, but their social media profile pushed them over the edge in a good way. 70% have also not hired somebody because of what they found. They need to understand that. Missing a job is significantly worse than missing, the last 2 games of the season. So you need to discuss the short and long-term benefits, what it can do for them as a student athlete at a university now. Like most communities are begging for reasons to root for their teams. If it's a bad year, they want to pull for these teams. Give them a reason to. If your student athletes are online telling their stories and you're telling their stories, give fans a reason to connect and pull for and come support your student athletes. That's significant for them in the short term, significant for the university in the short term, because you've got these brand ambassadors who are doing a tremendous job of spreading the message of your program and your team. Long-term benefits, like I said, getting a job. Athletes are natural leaders, and so if they can use social media well in terms of getting a job, that's huge for the university. You can continue to brag on them as they move away from the university into a career. I had coffee 2 weeks ago. Seems like everything's 2 weeks ago. A student athlete played basketball at the University of Georgia. He used social media well to get an internship on the digital media team with the U.S. Olympic Committee this summer. That's huge for him, huge for the University of Georgia to be able to say that. But he understood that social media can be a good thing for him, so he used that in a positive and appropriate way. The only way to be successful with this is to have ongoing discussions, right? One conversation isn't going to change something. It may be bigger than that. If you're going to sit down and talk with them, or if a coach is, whoever talks to them needs to be somebody that uses social media. If you're not using it, they'll know it in 5 minutes. Just because these kids don't use it well doesn't mean they don't know about it. Right? They can tell if you've just gotten up and read an article on Mashable 5 minutes ago and now you're going to talk about Twitter. They're smart enough to get that. I talked with a student athlete a few months back. They had a program come in, an outside speaker come in and talk to their team about social media usage. He said, man, it was just awful. And it was a company that tons of schools use. I mean, massive amounts of collegiate programs, professional leagues, collegiate conferences. He said, Kevin, it was awful. So they're talking about social networks that I haven't used in 5 years. I don't even know how to use AOL Instant Messenger effectively. That's not impacting anything. And I said, well, did you know that this company doesn't even have a Twitter account? He said, I'm not surprised. So this company that's educating student athletes doesn't even use social media, but they're trying to tell student athletes how to use it well. So you need to make sure that whoever has that discussion understands and uses social media in a positive way. You may not, somebody in your office might, but find somebody that does. If you can't find somebody, then bring in an outside speaker. Do your homework. Make sure it's somebody that actually uses social media. There are companies outside of ours that I think do a good job that I'd be more than happy to tell you about. There are companies that don't do a good job, but take 5 minutes to do a Google search. It's pretty easy to find out whether or not they have a Twitter account and see how they use it. One of the things you need to discuss with your student athletes is online reputation management. So when they're online, there are 3 types of reputations: good, bad, and invisible. Good meaning that they understand it, they use it well, they've developed a brand or an identity online. So they're using it appropriately, they're being positive tweets, they're not griping, complaining, getting in fights on social media. They're focused on 1 or 2, 3 topics. Right? They're not just creating a bunch of noise. If you say so-and-so's name, you think, okay, yeah, they tweet about this a lot. And it could be any topic, but they're fairly focused on what they tweet about. They use proper grammar, which is a huge thing with student athletes. Again, they're tweeting in languages I've never seen in my life, and Google Translate is no help. 140 characters is a limited amount of space on Twitter. Facebook, it's a lot more space. If you can't fit it in 140 characters without using the English language, then don't tweet it, or do 2 tweets if you really have to. But you need to understand to use actual language. Bad, they're vulgar, they're getting in fights, they're starting controversies, they're just, they're creating noise online. One of the problems that we've determined that success for student athletes on social media is not getting in trouble. And one of the first questions I ask a school when we're in discussions, say, how are they doing right now? Oh, good. I've had no trouble. Good. So I'll pull up a student athlete, and maybe they tweeted 50 times about Justin Bieber in the last day. That's not bad, right? There's nothing to get in trouble for, but that's not using it well. Just because they're not getting in trouble for it doesn't mean they're using it well. They're not representing themselves well. They're not representing the university well. So we have to redefine what success looks like online. Invisible is almost as bad as having a bad online reputation. Nowadays, it's 2012, everybody has some form of digital footprint. So they've got to have something. But they need to understand these different kinds of reputations and be intentional about the kind of reputation they want to have online. People change by being educated and empowered to use something. They change when they are shown how it can be a benefit to them. I'll go back to the basketball example. My coach showed me how to shoot well because then I could make more shots. Some people have bad form. If you watch golf, Jim Furyk has the ugliest swing in the history of any sport. Great golfer. But if you show somebody how to do something appropriate and not just show them how to do it, but why that's beneficial, then it clicks, okay, then I need to make some changes. But it's about educating them, it's about empowering them, not telling them no, don't. Nobody learns that way. What impact does this have overall? Obviously it gives them and the university a positive image online as well as in the community because your fans are following these student athletes. If they're representing themselves well, that goes a long way in the community. They're going to support them during downtimes. They're going to support them during struggles because they see what kind of people they are. Good example, Oklahoma State quarterback Brandon Weeden. This was right before the Bedlam football game. Some idiot, I won't call him a fan, one of the psychos on the internet, tweeted to Brandon Weeden and Justin Blackman, hey, hope your plane doesn't land, hope you die in a plane crash. Because our women's basketball team, we just had 2 people die in a plane crash the week before. So this guy tweets to Brandon Weeden and Justin Blackman, I hope you get in a plane crash and die. Number one, the guy's pretty intelligent because the game was in Stillwater. Right? They're not getting on a plane. They're driving a mile to the football stadium. Even if it was in Norman, hour drive. So not an intelligent person, but they're out there on Twitter. You can't get around it. Brandon Weeden's smart enough to know, okay, I don't need to get into it with this guy. So he retweeted and added a comment, this is a joke, right? Knowing Oklahoma State fans were going to go crazy on this guy. And they lit him up. OU fans defended Brandon Weeden, started going after this guy. An OU fan figured out who the kid was, where he went to school, posted his phone number, his address, his name. Kid didn't have a very good 48 hours. Right? We found out the compliance official at their school, the student affairs official at their school. It turns out he was a college student athlete at a school. They found his baseball coach. Phones lit up. OU and OSU hate each other because of how Brandon Weeden uses social media and how he also is in the media and in person. Right? He's consistent online and offline, which is a huge thing. Oklahoma fans know that Brandon Weeden's a good kid. Yes, he wears orange, and we hate that on Saturday. He's a good kid. What happened is unacceptable. We're going to step up and defend him because of how he represents himself. He created a positive online image in the community in a state that is torn between 2 football teams. You also generate fan interest. Right? Like I said, fans are following these kids. They're following your official team accounts, but they're following these kids because they want inside access. They want to know about these kids. And then you're setting them up for future success, which again is beneficial for your team, beneficial for recruiting. If recruits see your kids using social media and using it well, that's a huge thing for recruiting. Bob Stoops mentioned one time, they asked him, why don't you just ban Twitter? Because his players are known for not being great. He said, I've thought about it. As silly as it sounds, if we ban Twitter, we're going to lose recruits. He goes, I'll be the first to admit that that's just silly, but that's the world we live in. These are the tools that these kids are using. we can't ban it. That's going to hurt us. Another program that I won't name, like many, uses social media for recruiting. They know that's where the kids are. That's how they connect with them. As soon as they get as a football team, as soon as they get on campus, they're banned from Twitter. So you've used it to bring the kid into the program, then you turn around and banned it. We need to be consistent with our approach. Talked about fan connection. This is probably 8 months old, but 40% of fans, so they become bigger and more passionate fans about their teams due to social media, because they're getting more information about their teams, about their players. So you're creating more interest, which results in ticket sales and support. When used well, social media can have an impact far beyond the classroom and the field. When these players, generally their impact is on the football field, on the baseball diamond, on the basketball court, or in a classroom. That's where their influence is. Social media allows that to be national, international, which is huge for your program. So it can have a significant benefit, again, if they understand how to use it well and why they should be using it well. Talk about monitoring, which is a huge topic right now. It's something that our firm does. There are several strategies that schools employ when it comes to monitoring. One is forcing friendships, making a student athlete friend a coach or administrator. It's actually against Facebook terms of service to do that. And it's my guess in the next year that's going to be made illegal. There are 15 states have introduced legislation, and 2 federal bills have been introduced that will make that illegal, because what you're doing is forcing a student athlete to give you access to their password protected content, because Facebook's very private. If they understand privacy settings, which is something that needs to be discussed with them, they can make it very private. They're not going to get an award for having 5,000 Facebook friends. There's no value in that. Most of those people are wanting to catch them doing something unnecessary or inappropriate. A lot of them follow players on Twitter. Not a problem with that. It's a public network. Some of these bills include asking for passwords. I've never seen a program require that a student athlete turn over their password, but don't do that. Facebook, I mentioned it being private. My wife, if she posts a picture and tags me in it, I have to approve that before that shows up on my profile. Right? Players need to understand the privacy settings of these social networks. And again, they have a right to privacy. Another thing they do is hire third-party monitoring firms. The way that some of those work, not ours, but that some work, is that they've developed a Facebook app that your student athletes have to install, like Words with Friends, Farmville. Those are all Facebook apps. They've developed a Facebook app that your student athletes, you force them to install. As soon as they do, they give that app permission to access every single bit of their content. Every picture, every video, every comment, every post, their birthday, their email address, their phone number, their relationship status, every relationship status they've ever had, their family history. You can make custom friend lists on Twitter. It accesses those, their calendar of events. Pretty invasive. If I spend 4 years of my child's high school telling them not to friend somebody they don't know on Facebook to protect their content online, and then they go play at a school that says, hey, let this guy that none of us really know but has some software access all of your content, it's pretty invasive. So there are privacy laws that are now being adjusted specifically for Facebook, dealing with the employers and people trying to get jobs, and employers have asked them to log into Facebook as they're sitting there, but they're also specifically about students. One of them, SNOPA, the Social Networking Online Privacy Act. It's one of the bills that it's been introduced at a national level. If it passes, which has a lot of support, will go into effect this year. It's going to impact how we monitor. Now, monitoring is necessary, but it has to be a complement to education, right? Monitoring is not going to prevent a tweet from happening. You can't. There's no app that stops somebody from tweeting or stops somebody from posting on Facebook. Monitoring, what it should do is identify additional opportunities for discussion and for education. Like I mentioned with this education stuff, you need to have ongoing discussions. Monitoring identifies those opportunities, and there's some compliance issues that go with that, with self-reporting, so it's a compliance tool. But it shouldn't be based in fear. And when you monitor, the way I mentioned before, student athletes are going to create fake accounts, and they're going to turn fake accounts over to these companies, say, okay, monitor this one, and they never post on it. I see student athletes all the time posting that. Somebody will say, well, who is this? Well, it's so-and-so, coach banned Twitter, so I had to make a new account. Coach banned Facebook, had to make a new account. So they're going to use this. If we're creating a culture of fear, we're encouraging inappropriate use because then we don't know what's being posted because we've torn down this level of trust that they should have with us and how they use it. Most players, when it comes to friending a coach on Facebook, I think most are okay with that because they've signed with that coach and with that program for a reason, right? They have some level of trust with that coach or with people on that staff. So most aren't going to have a problem with friending a coach, but they can't legally be forced to do so. It's against Facebook terms of service. Facebook has come out saying if it gets down to it, we'll sue people for doing that. So you don't want to put your school at liability. Another issue with monitoring is that if you're using a third party, make sure they're not logging and archiving your players' posts. What I mean by that is, let's say one of your players is 21. He can go out and drink, goes out to a bar, tweets, I just threw back 6 shots of Jack. You're going to get a text message alert, so-and-so drinking quite a bit. So you're going to call him, text him, do something, and say, A, delete the tweet, B, don't drive home. Right? I'll call you a cab, whatever, just don't drive home. Well, if his next tweet is, driving home, this should be fun, and he kills somebody, if your monitoring software is logging those tweets, you're liable and responsible for that person's death because technically you saw that he tweeted he was drunk. Now he's tweeting that he's driving. If it's not logging the tweets, all you ever saw was that he had 6 shots of Jack. You don't know that he tried to drive home because there's not an offensive keyword, right, in that tweet. So there's no responsibility on you or the monitoring company. So questions that need to be asked when it comes to how monitoring companies do it. We'll end with this again. If educated properly, your student athletes and your coaches can be the most effective PR your program can have. They can take you from a small town in southern Mississippi to northwest Washington, right? Impact recruits. Recruits can see that if they understand how to use it well. And it's free. That's the nice thing about social media. Twitter and Facebook are free. Some of the most powerful tools that we have at our fingertips, and they're free if we just understand how to use them well and if we're intentional with how we use those tools. That is all I have. There's my information if you want to connect. If you want a copy of the presentation, just give me your business card. I'll email slides to you. But next up, we're going to have Patrick